G'day, I'm Tim Thompson and I'm in Ellarish today, just below Cairns in far North Queensland, and I'm having a look at a fantastic fence trial that's been really successful, and it's a great story about farmers, conservationists and a forward-thinking fencing company coming together to improve the results for producers and improve environmental outcomes. Whites Rural have recently completed some trials of a brand new style of fence that promises to not only have great performance when you're running stock, but also look after local wildlife. Did you know that 86% of injuries of vulnerable wildlife occur on the top strand of a barbed wire fence? By changing this top strand with something that's economical and easy to use, most wildlife injuries from fences and farming can be eliminated. Wildlife-friendly fencing is not a new idea, and it's been tried in the past, but it's often failed because it requires expensive modifications, time-consuming fixes, or things like reflective strips that can be taken off the fence by livestock and cause them injury. Well, it turns out the solution was simpler than everyone thought. By simply replacing your top strand of barb with a similar performing wire, the wildlife wire allows you to dramatically reduce the impact of your business on native wildlife. Wildlife wire will be familiar to anyone who runs barb. It can be run on the same machinery, and it's completely safe. So, Ian, you're a member of a conservation group that's been involved in this trial.
That's right.
You're C4?
C4, that's right.
And your main interest is in cassowary protection, but you're also interested in the smaller marsupials like little gliders and even bats.
That's right. Well, we focus on the cassowary because it's a bellwether sort of species, and it tends to be that what's good for the cassowary is good for all the other wildlife as well.
It's a pretty scary animal. I wouldn't like to untangle one from a fence.
I don't think, no, you definitely don't want to do that. I think
it's a bird that comes with its own helmet?
Yep, it comes with its own helmet and very sharp claws.
Yeah.
So it's one of the few birds that's actually documented to have killed humans.
But having said that, it's quite vulnerable, as are a number of species up here in far North Queensland, and they are severely impacted by some of our practices when we farm, most notably the top strand of barbed wire fence.
That's right. Look, like many animals here, they need a wide range to be able to supply themselves with enough food.
Yep.
And so where fences and things like that create a barrier, it makes them hard to move from one food source to another. And one of the issues here is the barbs, especially to do with flying animals, marsupials and bats, but also the bigger ones, when they can't get underneath, they'll try and go over the top and they'll get hooked up.
And that's when they hit the top and they get tangled.
That's right, yeah.
Now, conservationists and farmers, interesting dialogues occur between the two on quite a regular basis. Your approach has been a little bit different in trying to run a successful trial here.
Yeah, look, when we started doing this, we realised that there were lots of fences that were really good for wildlife, but none of them particularly suited the needs of the farmers.
And you researched quite a few, didn't you?
Yeah, we looked at all sorts of different types, putting all sorts of things on the wire, hanging things down. None of them worked. The animals pull them off, or the farmers have got to do too much extra work to put them on and look after them.
Yep.
So we wanted something that was a simple swap for the farmer, same tools, same techniques, something that he could just put up because it's something very similar to what he does every day. And this is
so the farmer doesn't have to change.
No.
That's the important message here. The farmer doesn't have to change.
No
but
extra
they can
cost.
get a better result.
That's right. No extra cost, no extra work, better result for the wildlife, and no difference for the stock.
This is the standard fence up here?
That's correct, yeah.
All right, so can you run through what your recommendations are from the trial,
Sure.
what you guys have found?
What we've done? Well, we built this fence to mirror a normal barbed wire fence for this area.
Yep.
So it's got the 4 strands, and they're all spaced exactly the same as a normal barbed wire would be. So we're doing apples with apples.
And that wire is exactly the same as this wire here.
That's right.
It just doesn't have the barbs.
That's exactly right. It's made exactly the same wire on the same machine, they just don't put the barbs on it. So
Okay.
it's tension to the same level as these normal barbed wires.
Now, you've also got your wildlife wire on the bottom strand as well as the top strand. What's your logic and reasoning behind that?
The main thing that we find here is that the wildlife will mostly, the large animals will go under the fence rather than over. And so this meant they're not impacted, they're hooked up on the barbs. We also wanted to test it because increasingly we're seeing 5-wire fences in this area. They're starting to do things like that, and so we're hoping by putting 2 barbless wires on the bottom, it'll still allow the animals to pass, because
So what you're recommending is if you go 5 strand, do 2 strands of wildlife wire on the bottom,
that's
not
correct.
1.
Yes,
So you're basically barbless up until about knee height.
that's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
And what we find is if the animals lean on the fence, they impact the barbs very quickly, even so. So
Yep.
it makes no difference. But it means that animals can pass through, wildlife can pass through,
Yep.
without getting hooked up on the barbs.
Because you're right, most native wildlife will go under a fence rather than over. They
That's
only
right.
go over if they're being challenged or they're scared.
That's right. Yeah, and if they go over, then without any barbs on the top, they won't get hooked on the top either.
Yeah.
From a wildlife perspective, this fence is on a ridge line, as you can see, which is usually a good place to trap wildlife. We haven't had any bats or marsupial gliders caught up on this fence, but I believe there have been at least one caught up on the normal barbed wire fence that runs parallel.
Matt and Claire, you're the fencing contractors that put in this wildlife-friendly fence.
Yes, this is correct.
Indeed.
I'm intrigued because I'm the Victorian. My apologies.
Yeah.
But we fence a little bit differently down in Victoria, and I'm always fascinated by how fences evolve from the environment, and they're a reflection of the environment. Now you run 4-strand fences up here.
Some farmers, like highways or close to major roads, will put the 5-strand barb in.
Yeah.
The ones that are more cautious, that they don't want their cattle going onto the
That's
roads.
an expensive problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. So-
But anyway, with the 4-strand, we usually keep that first strand at 450 at height.
Yeah.
That's pretty much allows for your grass to grow up. It's not overtaking your wire, pulling the wire down, taking your strain off your wire. Because
Yeah.
we're such a wet environment up here as well,
Yeah.
within the wet tropics, so to speak.
Yeah.
You don't want the grass has a lot of water content in it, and that sitting on the wire will rust your wire, and then you got dramas.
Hence 4-strand barb.
Yes.
So talk us through this fence. Let's go over and have a look at the
Yeah.
fence. So what do you reckon of it? You're a fencing contractor. You've put up fences for years and years and years. What do the two of you guys think of the wildlife wire?
Yeah, no, I can't see any drama with it. It's a lot easier to work with than working with the actual barbed wire. You're not getting spiked all the time as
Yeah, that's a big thing. It's not hurting us
I'm
and it's not
surprised
hurting the
you guys
wildlife.
have still got 2 eyes. Like, what's
Yeah.
going on?
well, yeah.
I mean that's another good thing. What they've done, they've kept that wire the same as what barb is. It's counter twisted, so it
Yeah.
won't unravel.
Yeah.
And I think they've slightly changed it from when we worked with it, because it was like a trial run, because it was starting to unravel up towards the
In
post
shorter
when
runs,
you-
we're not really straining it up nice and tight. It would unravel a bit.
It's held up. I mean, that's 7 months, and that's what we were worried. Is it going to continue to unravel?
Especially with
Yeah.
cattle pushing on it.
Yeah.
Because no matter how much grass you got in your paddock, there's always greener grass on the other side, isn't there?
Exactly.
So the cattle are always going to push on it.
But they're always going to come down where the grass is. You're not
That's-
necessarily going to push up here, are they?
No, well that's why we were interested with having the bottom wire like that.
Yeah.
Are they going to push on that wire a lot more
Yeah.
because it doesn't have the barb on it?
Yeah.
But
They
mean,
seem to be
so-
coming into contact with this one as they
yeah,
do
although
that, don't they?
Yeah.
they'll probably tend to put their head through this bit to get the grass on, just on the
yeah.
other side of the fence here. And, being barbless, they will probably tend to go more so than
Yeah,
That's
I would
exciting,
say.
isn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's the first product I've heard of for fencing that is specifically for wildlife protection, and it's no extra cost to the farmer. I mean, if anything, I think that's going to end up being cheaper because it's
Yeah.
less steel and processing. You don't have to put the barbs on. So.
Yeah, yeah, and it's
Yeah.
cheaper because you can work with it quicker too. You're not
Oh, gosh,
fiddling around
yeah.
barbs and all the
And it
rest of
fits
it.
all the same tools, of course. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fencer doesn't have to change anything. They don't have to get anything extra for it, So, yeah, it's well thought of. And I think there was a reason why they didn't go with just plain, wasn't there?
so there
'Cause
was
you
on
can
a
get a
cone
plain single wire.
wire. It's not as well seen, I don't think, as what the...
So it's just as visible as this, and that's
That's-
really
that's
what
the
it's
big-
there for,
yeah,
isn't
that's
it?
exactly
It's the
right.
visible deterrent.
Yes.
So
yes.
people think it's the barbs that's stopping cattle from jumping the fence,
Oh, but they'll
but
see
it's
there's
actually
yeah.
the visibility.
With the visibility of it, yes.
Isn't
And
that interesting?
yeah.
Oh yeah, they're not silly when they're hungry. Eh?
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Well, Matt and Claire, thank you so much for your time today and talking to us. And it's exciting to talk to you guys. And if you live in the tropical north and you need some fantastic fencing put up, look no further than Matt and Claire. What's the name of the business, guys?
Matt Craw Fencing.
Matt Craw Fencing, get onto them. Jenny, thank you for coming today. You're holding something quite precious. It's a very unfortunate name for such a precious creature to be called the tube-nosed bat, but I think there are quite obvious reasons why it's called that. Yes. One of the most gorgeous little creatures that I've seen in a long time. You actually rescue a number of these bats from barbed wire fences?
Lots of them off barbed wire.
And where do you commonly find them on a barbed wire fence?
Mostly the top strand.
So mostly on the top strand. It's very rare that they're elsewhere.
Yes.
So why is it that the tube-nosed bat and some of the other more endangered bats have so much trouble navigating barbed wire fences? I thought they used radar and they were amazing flyers and all this sort of thing.
Look, all bats have good vision, but most of the bats that are being caught on the top strand are actually your fruit and nectar bats. So these are bats with big eyes, but no echolocation.
Because it's the predators, it's the carnivores that have the echolocation, is that right?
It's the little insect-eating bats.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And very often they just don't see the fence.
Yep.
Very often it's very windy conditions, particularly then if the fence is along a ridge line. They're sort of flying a line, they're trying to get up over a raise and boom, straight into a barbed wire fence.
So they're flying along the terrain, bang, this is about the right height for them and they hit it.
Yeah, they wouldn't normally be quite this low, but on a ridge line, you know, the ground has run up to sort of meet them.
Yep.
The other thing is often barbed wire's been strung across a water body and they've come down to get a drink.
Right. So they swoop
down. Yeah, because what they do is they fly down, get their bellies wet and fly back up and lick it off their wings. So they've come down low and boom, there's a barbed wire fence.
Now this little girl's been caught in one of those barbed wire fences and there's a bit of damage to her. She's not actually able to fly properly again.
No, she's a
permanent. Can we have a look at the sort of damage that it does to these little creatures?
It's fully intact down there. There we go, love. Whereas on this side, it's a huge tear.
And that was from a barbed wire fence?
Yeah, look at that. Yes.
So that little girl's not going to be able to obviously fly again?
Go back to the wild, that's right.
Yeah.
So she's a little bat now that talks to tourists each day.
So she's still doing a job?
She's doing a job. She's selling bats as cute little animals that
we actually need to care about.
Yes, exactly.
What do you think of the wildlife wire? Do you think it's going to make much of a difference to your job?
It'll make a huge difference if landholders can have that on the top strand.
Yep. It's
going to help all the gliders, owls, bats, and it'll make a huge difference to wildlife carers around Australia. A huge proportion of animals that come into care come in as a result of barbed wire fences.
Ralph, how are you, mate?
Very well, thanks, Tim.
Mate, thank you very much for spending time with us today. Now, you're one of the farmers that's worked with this project with running the wildlife wire on the top of the fences.
That's right.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you do?
I've got about 60 acres, not a big holding. I've just sold some land, so I've downsized quite a bit.
Yep.
I run some drought masters, just breed them up and sell the weaners.
And they do all right on this country?
They do okay. It looks better than it is. The pasture hasn't got a lot of guts in it. The stuff that I've got anyway. So you can't push it too hard. And the stocking rates aren't high, but they do okay if you look after them. You've got to watch the ticks and the flies at certain times of year. But the drought masters particularly are pretty hardy beasts.
Pretty good with that.
Yeah.
Now, not running barb on the top of your fences with cattle, particularly your thicker skinned cattle, is that causing you any issues at all? You've been doing that for a while now.
Yeah, not a problem at all. I have had to redo all of my boundary fencing on the home block.
Yeah.
And I started off doing the traditional, 3 barb, 2 plain sort of things, and then I was actually talking to the local C4 fellow, and he said, "Why don't you just try running a plain on top? And much better for wildlife." And for me, that just made sense from a wildlife protection point of view, but primarily also it's easier if you don't have to worry about putting a
Yeah, you don't have to wear
barb.
your gauntlets and get flicked in the eye.
It's a
and-
pain.
Yeah,
It's a pain.
yeah, barbed wire's fun stuff to work with, isn't
Yes,
it?
we all know that. So yeah, I tried it, and it doesn't make any difference to the cattle. I mean, cattle, the top wire is really there just to deter them from jumping over the fence.
It's a visible barrier,
It's a
isn't
visible
it?
barrier.
Yeah.
Unless you've got trees and they're trying to reach over the top of the fence for trees, and if you've got trees over your fence, you've got bigger problems anyway.
Yeah, well, you don't have a fence for long, do you?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So it hasn't made any difference at all to the stock proofing, the stock proofness of the fence at all, and it's just easier, so much easier, and it's cheaper.
Now, you're an ex-Victorian,
Yes.
many years ago.
Oh,
Do you run a 4 or 5 barb 5-strand fence?
5-strand fence.
So you're running the 5-strand
Yeah,
fences as
yeah,
well, yeah.
yeah.
So what are you doing? What's your magic formula? Just plain on the top and 4 barb? Or,
Yeah, that's what I'm running. And I've also run a hot wire around the inside for electric, just to keep. I want the cattle off my fence totally anyway.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they don't go-
Regardless of
yeah.
whether there was a top barb or
Exactly.
not. Yeah.
Exactly right. So,
Yeah.
and it's worked pretty well so far.
Okay.
Worked very well.
Yeah, no, very good. So having this wildlife wire means that people don't have to change what they do, does it?
No.
And that's important, isn't it? Because you've got to go out and get new gear, you've got to go out and get new wire.
No, it's
You're not going to, are you?
the only change is that it's easier because you're not
Yeah.
having to deal with that barbed wire on the top and having to string it through fences and fence posts and those sorts of things. So there's no change. It's to me it's obvious. It's an obvious change to make.
Good on you, Ralph. Thanks for
No
your
worries,
time,
Tim.
mate. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. And thank you for having us out in such beautiful country.
It is God's own.
So the proof's in. It looks like Murray's wildlife wire is working.